It is clear that Aaron Rodgers wants the Minnesota Vikings, but the Pittsburgh Steelers are the better fit. I'll explain on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready, Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome into the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, joined today by Locked On NFL expert Lauren Cox. On today's episode, we're going to talk about why the Saints are taking a risky path to the 2025 season. We'll talk about Cam Ward's Pro Day, which happened on Monday, but we'll start with the drama king himself, Aaron Rodgers. Before we dive into, I want to thank you for making the Locked On NFL podcast your first listen each and every day, and for being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. Aaron Rodgers visits the Pittsburgh Steelers over the weekend, and no deal gets done. I think that it's pretty clear that that's because Aaron Rodgers really wants to go to the Minnesota Vikings. And I think the conversation is that that's because the Vikings are a better fit for a quarterback. And now we hear the report on Monday that Rodgers wants a Packers-like stable organization. Well, if all of that is true, Lauren, I can't even read today. Then Kevin O'Connell, that's where I'm going. Kevin O'Connell is not a better coach overall for consistency-wise than Mike Tomlin. The Steelers organization, by far, has been a more stable organization than the Minnesota Vikings throughout their time. And I think you could even argue that the Pittsburgh Steelers have a pretty good infrastructure around the quarterback, almost as good as the Minnesota Vikings. That may sound crazy, but with the addition of DK Metcalf, the Vikings offensive line was a tad overrated last year if you look at like their pass blocking efficiency ratings. So I'm just saying, I think if you want a stable organization like the Packers, that's the Pittsburgh Steelers, not the Minnesota Vikings. And with DK Metcalf, with George Pickens, add some things on the offensive line in the draft, I think that the supporting casts are pretty similar, and I'd go with Pittsburgh.
Well, Tony, I think that the Vikings have had a couple of more successful winning seasons in recent memory, right? The 14 wins this past season, and then 2 years ago it was, or I guess 3 years ago it was 13 wins. Then, like, yes, he could talk about stability, but are we talking about long-term stability of the last 10 years of the Steelers? Or are we looking at the last, 3 years of Kevin O'Connell with the Vikings has been more successful on a shorter, smaller sample size than Mike Tomlin in terms of playoff victories and regular season stuff? And I think it's easy for Rodgers to sort of paint this as like, oh, I want to be in a Packers-like organization. No, you want to go to the team that gives you the best chance to win. And it feels like the Vikings are maybe a little bit closer to that right now than what the Steelers are.
I just don't know. I just don't know about that. I just don't know. I mean, the Pittsburgh Steelers with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback and DK Metcalf now at wide receiver, and another year to add things on the offensive line, you're going to get Troy Fautanu back to play left tackle. Like, I am not so 100% certain. The Minnesota Vikings offensive line, like I said, they're going to get better now because they got Will Fries at guard, but and I don't think that Ryan Kelly.
I like Ryan Kelly. He had a good season. I mean, he's not a Pro Bowler anymore, but that's a solid veteran player who can stabilize an offensive line for you.
If he's on the field. If he's on the field. You're right about that. But there are some questions there. Of course, I guess I don't think it would be insane. Like, if you put Aaron Rodgers on the Vikings, Aaron Rodgers on the Steelers, I guess I don't think it would be an insane outcome for the Steelers to have more wins than the Vikings.
So I guess I'm thinking, I know the teams are different now because of free agency, but Russell Wilson versus Sam Darnold, right? How is Sam Darnold that much better than Russell Wilson, or was he in a much better situation than Russell Wilson this past season? That's what I'm stuck on a little bit here.
Well, that's fair. Now, here's what I would say though, is the Steelers didn't have DK Metcalf last year, and the Steelers didn't have another offseason to bolster their offensive line and have their young offensive tackles take a step forward. Like there's a maturation of the roster itself that happens from 2024 to 2025, which I know you're aware of, which I think makes a big difference here. But I will say this. I have been consistent throughout this offseason, and my guy Luke, the brain, Braun, thinks that I'm crazy. But I think that Aaron Rodgers is a better player than Russell Wilson. There is never a time in their lives where Russell Wilson has been a better player than Aaron Rodgers. And it's not right now either. So I guess from that perspective, I think that it does make it like Sam Darnold was better than Russell Wilson enough to make this team that. But the Steelers won, 9, 10 games? The Vikings won 13?
14.
14? You know what I mean? So I think Sam Darnold, maybe not that much better, but it's probably 2 games better than Russell Wilson. And I think that Aaron Rodgers kind of split that gap. And then with the Steelers supporting cast being a little bit better, we have a playoff team.
I think the thing I'm stuck on is Kevin O'Connell versus Arthur Smith, right?
That's your place. That's the place you want to tap on.
Well, but that becomes the Aaron Rodgers factor. Then it's like, if Aaron Rodgers is Aaron Rodgers, it doesn't matter as much whether it's Arthur Smith or Kevin O'Connell. But if Aaron Rodgers is a depleted Aaron Rodgers, then maybe Kevin O'Connell has a better shot of getting him back to being Aaron Rodgers, whereas Arthur Smith has, let's just be nice to say, he has limitations, even if he's not. He got something out of Russell Wilson. Like, it wasn't useless there, but not Kevin O'Connell level offensive scheming.
Yeah, well, I think ultimately that's the winner for the Minnesota Vikings, and why Aaron Rodgers in his mind is like, hey, I do want to go somewhere where I know I'm going to get high-level quarterback coaching, because this goes back to a point that I've been making for months now when talking about Aaron Rodgers and what he might do. I know that everybody wants to make a big stake over the diva thing, and he wants to go sign Cobb and go sign Lazard and go get my guys. And blah, blah. I just think in this report that we got on Monday that Rodgers wants a stable organization, I think it's evidence for my point as well. Rodgers does not want to be in charge now. He wants to take a passenger seat ride for his next year or 2 seasons. Like, he doesn't want to be the guy that's making all the decisions and is painted in the media as someone who's calling all the shots. He just wants to be a part of a good organization so he can just play football and trust that he's going to have a decent team around him. So I think Rodgers is going to have a change in mindset in these last 2 years. And some may think it's naive to think that a leopard would change his stripes, but I don't think that there needs to be some big psychological leap for an old Aaron Rodgers to say, I'll just, go play football and enjoy being with the guys.
Even though Aaron Rodgers is older than Kevin O'Connell and maybe feels like, I could come in there and be he's literally been around longer than you have, Kevin O'Connell.
Yeah.
So how things are supposed to go. Whereas Mike Tomlin, that's Mike Tomlin's organization. Everyone knows that. But could Rodgers infiltrate's too harsh? There's too much negative connotation there. But could Rodgers have more room to wiggle into Minnesota that's not so established on the top end as Tomlin?
I certainly think that he would, because I don't think Mike Tomlin would go for anything. And Rodgers is like, you put all the factors together, I'll probably feel a little more comfortable in Minnesota. Maybe that's where the lean comes from. It's just Kevin O'Connell, not only from a play caller perspective, from a culture perspective as well. And maybe he just really, really loves Brett Favre more than he's ever told us. And he really does want to just go as his hero goes. But with that in mind, we're talking about the oldest quarterback in the NFL. Now we need to talk about the newest quarterback in the NFL, Cam Ward. Pro Day went pretty well. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. Look, folks, March Madness is here. It's been great so far, and FanDuel is giving you a chance to get in on the action still like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, even who's going to cut down the nets. Look, I'm going to be honest. I've been picking favorites all March Madness long. And hey, there may not be a lot of excitement in picking the favorites, but there's a lot of winning, whether it's spreads, totals, game props. FanDuel gives me everything I need to back my chalk picks. And with games happening almost every day, all the time, FanDuel lets you stay in on the action. Make sure that you visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. Again, that's FanDuel.com. All right, Lauren, let's continue today's edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. We talked about Aaron Rodgers, the Minnesota Vikings where he's at. I really do think the Steelers would be the better fit, but I definitely do understand why the Vikings could be considered the logical pick there as well. But now want to go from an old quarterback to a young quarterback, and Cam Ward had his pro day with the Miami Hurricanes on Monday. It was a really good performance from Cam Ward. A pro day doesn't qualify you to be the number one pick, but it certainly can act as confirmation. What makes you a number one pick is a lot of other things. And my guys from the Locked On NFL Draft podcast talked about that.
6'2", 220 pounds, 9-inch hands, guy who I believe he led the country in passing touchdowns in 2024. Miami quarterback Cam Ward. Keith, there's a lot of rumors swirling now that he is the projected first overall pick for the Tennessee Titans, which is crazy how that has changed from the Tennessee Titans saying we're not passing up on the generational talent to go quarterback. And now they're probably hitching their wagon to a quarterback, kind of how both of us felt like they should have done instead of putting out that statement. We'll see how it plays out. But when you look at Cam Ward, Keith, you got Callahan, Coach Callahan's the head coach. They're talking about trading Will Levis. Like, that's already up. They're trying to ship him out of town. That kind of signals that they're going quarterback in the 2025 NFL draft.
Look, and if that wasn't signal enough, Lauren, or Kevin, as you're affectionately called now, Lauren, if that wasn't enough, Lauren, the Titans sent their president of football operations, their general manager, their assistant general manager, their vice president of player personnel, their head coach, their offensive coordinator, their quarterback coach. And not only that, they sent their entire media team, social media. Why would they do that? Brian Windhorst. Why would they do that? Why? Because they're filming the experience for content that they put out after they draft this man number one overall. Look, the Titans took him out to dinner. I know that the Browns are very interested in Cam Ward. The Giants would absolutely love to get a shot at Cam Ward. But even as someone who preferred the option to trade down for the Tennessee Titans, I'm sorry, Lauren, but the hay is in the barn, as they say. The Titans are going to take Cam Ward number one overall in the draft.
When they really haven't addressed the quarterback position, and signed Brandon Allen, but they haven't addressed the start.
Give me a break. Right.
Yeah, but they haven't addressed it in any other meaningful way there. Like, what, they're just going to pass on QB and just roll with Will Levis and pretend like everything is totally fine and unchanged there. Like, this feels reminiscent to the Bears going to Caleb Williams' pro day last year, where maybe it was a little bit more obvious then. There was less question, but still, like, you kind of send the whole cavalcade there. Everyone can get comfortable and familiar with this, and it's a signal that, like, yeah, we don't have to pretend anymore. We don't have to field trade calls or whatever. Like,
yeah,
one overall pick, we don't have to leave everybody waiting. As soon as we are comfortable with the pick, and this is their way of just locking it in. They were probably pretty sure before this, but now it's like, see, everyone's here. We all agree. Great. Now we can move forward, get on with our lives, and look at the Cleveland Browns eventually and say, oh, now the draft starts at number 2.
Right. Again, for me, the phrase that I've been using is it's not qualification, it's confirmation. That's what you're getting with a pro day. I think that's the easiest way to sum it up. And it was fun. Cam Ward showcased all the things that makes him exciting. He's got great arm angles. He plays with a good athleticism and poise to him. He's got a strong enough arm to make all the throws. All those things were on display and great. But I liked Cam Ward's kind of I would say swagger, because I'm a millennial. But the kids these days would say aura. He had strong aura during this performance, and he was saying some things to the Tennessee Titans general manager and stuff like, hey, I'm solidifying it today, is what he said to him after one of his throws. He was yucking it up with Titans head coach Brian Callahan on the field and things like that. So I have consistently compared this to dating. And I think the first three, and adults, you know what I mean? Kids, if you're listening to this, take notes. The first 3 dates are basically interviews. You're kind of trying to figure out, am I compatible with this person? Would I even entertain being in a relationship with this person? After 3 dates, you have a pretty good idea. And then you can maybe, meet the family or go on a trip with friends or things like start to kind of branch out that relationship. That's where the Titans and Cam Ward are right now. They're not in the first 3 dates where they're trying to figure out if they like each other. They know they do. Now it's time to build the relationship since we know that there's one possible.
But does it worry you at all that, to keep the metaphor going here, that maybe it wasn't love at first sight, that it took a few dates to try and figure out whether we were compatible or not? Like, it's one thing, like, again, to drop back to the Bears and Caleb Williams last season, where like they knew in January, this is the guy we want to take number one. And the Titans were like, well, we're going to date around here. We're going to go on some dates with Abdul Carter, and we're going to go on some dates with Cam Ward. And then, the important thing is that you find the right partner there. But when it's the number 1 overall pick, you want that fairy tale love at first sight, like match made in heaven. And maybe this is a relationship that took a little bit more work to build up to something.
Hey, listen, I may be projecting a little bit here, Lauren, but I would say that the high school sweetheart route is awfully, awfully dangerous. You just simply don't know what else is out there until you try it. Like, I couldn't tell you what my favorite food was until I tried enough foods to know which one was my favorite. Like if chicken wings is all I've ever had, I'd probably think chicken wings are pretty great, although chicken wings are my favorite food, for maybe a bad example. But yeah, I understand what you mean. But I think the tape is right there. Like, Cam Ward it's not like how people talked about Burrow or how people talked about Andrew Luck. Like, the tape isn't that good to where, slam dunk, number 1 pick, blah, 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 no question about it. But I think the tape is good enough to be in the conversation. And then the player himself, his mentality, his work off the field, who he is as a person, his nervous system. I think once you get to know those things, which the Titans had a long meeting with Cam Ward right after the combine to try to figure out those things, I think that's when the tide started to turn. If they were like, hey, the film is right on the borderline, but your personality is so great into what we're looking for that we think the combination of those two things can work. But the question becomes, what does this mean for the Giants now? Because Aaron Rodgers doesn't seem like he's interested in the Giants anymore. Cam Ward not going to be an option for the Giants. Patricia Traina talked about that on her show, Locked On Giants.
They're not looking at him as a 17-game starter.
All right. Well, with that said, you said you don't necessarily buy that they're still in on Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson. Now, I could see Aaron Rodgers, I still don't think he's coming here. But that being said, you bring up the point about how they paid Jameis Winston like a backup. Knowing that Joe Shane, Brian Dable have got to be better and get this team back on the right track, isn't it running a bit of a risk if you say, okay, they're definitely out on Russell Wilson and, now their only other option is to roll with a rookie quarterback?
Oh, yeah, I think it definitely is, Patty. The thing of it is, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if they're still on Russell Wilson. I think Wilson wants New York more than he wants anywhere else. So maybe he's less money when he otherwise to come to New York. I don't know how that's all going to work out. But if you're Joe Shane at this point, you probably throw everything you can at the wall. To me, you have to draft a young guy.
They have to. They have no other choice. The thing is, if you're not getting Cam Ward, do you take Shedeur Sanders at 3, or do you take one of Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter, and then you get a guy in the second round where you have pick number 34, which is essentially a second first-round pick?
I wonder if they're in a position where, there's not a ton of like super quarterback needy teams. Like, is there room to trade down and take Shedeur Sanders there? If somebody wants to go up for Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter or Mason Graham or whoever, like, I don't know. Are you worried about Shedeur getting past the Raiders at 6? Like, is that, and then, the Saints at 9? But other than that, like, it's not like, oh my gosh, there's all these teams fighting to get in the top 5 to get this quarterback there. Like, I wonder if there's position to move down and still get your quarterback, but not feel like, oh, I have to stay at 3 and get him. But would Jacksonville jump New England for that spot? Would the Jets jump up there? Like, I wonder if you can entice someone to get your quarterback and have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah, I was literally about to say, like, you want to eat your chips with dip right now. Like, that's what's happening. I don't think that they can afford to risk that. After Stafford fell apart and then Rodgers moved away from him and you're left with Jameis Winston, like, I don't think you can risk it. You just simply cannot risk it because you cannot go into a make or break season with your job on the line with Mr. 30-30 himself, Jameis Winston. You just simply cannot do that with your job on the line. You can't risk it. You got to get that young quarterback. I'm wondering if Shedeur Sanders does go number 2 to the Browns, which I don't buy it, But if that does happen, then what did the Giants do? Like, that is a doomsday scenario of epic proportions for them.
Yeah, I mean, you sell yourself on Jackson Dart? I mean, not at number 3 overall, I sure hope not. But, with the second pick, do you trade back up into the first round to make sure you get him there? Like, yeah, the Browns have a lot of power here at that number 2 spot. They really hold a lot of the keys to the draft here. And I think the Giants, I mean, could we see one of those, like, I think back to the Mitch Trubisky trade in 2017, the Bears go from 3 to 2 with the 49ers to make sure that they can get Trubisky at 2.
Yeah.
There were reportedly rumors of other teams trying to trade up to 2. And after the draft, it was revealed that no, the 49ers pretty much just fleeced the Bears there. There was concrete reporting that the 49ers had no other offers and just got I don't remember if it was a 3rd round pick or a 4th round pick from the Bears to move one spot to make sure the Bears could get Trubisky. And it worked out so great for the Bears in that pick. So the Giants might as well do the same thing.
Yeah, they could consider it. And one of the teams that they maybe could use for leverage is the New Orleans Saints. Ooh, stuck with Derek Carr, but certainly could be in the market for a young quarterback because they clearly trust their new coaching staff. And quite frankly, I don't know if I do. Ugh. All right, Lauren, let's cap off today's edition of Locked On NFL. We've talked about Aaron Rodgers wanting the Minnesota Vikings, but I think the Steelers are a better fit. Cam Ward, the clear QB1. I think it's pretty obvious he's going to be picked number 1 to the Tennessee Titans as well, which leaves the Giants in a tough spot. But the New Orleans Saints, I think, are in a tough spot as well. Before we discuss, do want to thank you again for making Locked On NFL your first listen. Make sure that you check out the afternoon edition of Locked On NFL with Tony Wiggins in the barbershop. And for your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Draft. It's that time of year. You heard from my guys, Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez earlier. They get you super, super prepared and have a ton of interesting discussions as the draft approaches. But want to hit on the Saints, and I throw it to my guy, the mastermind, Ross Jackson, to talk about how the Saints really haven't made a ton of changes to their offense.
The New Orleans Saints offense has not seen a lot of change so far this offseason. So far, the only new faces that have really come in for New Orleans that aren't returning faces, well, really, it's just one. It's just Velus Jones Jr., the wide receiver, running back, convert. There's been some players that have been away from the team for a little while, like Will Clapp and Brandon Cooks, who have now found their way back to the team. All fine and dandy, all good. But the New Orleans Saints didn't really influx a ton of talent over on the offensive side. They didn't really influx a ton of new and unfamiliar talent at all across the roster, with some exceptions like Justin Reed and Devon Godchaux. But for the most part, this team going into 2025 is the team that it was at 2024 or at the end of 2024, at least to this point. And so the expectation around improvement for the New Orleans Saints offense is going to have to come from somewhere else other than just the players. Yes, health will be a key factor, just like it is each and every season, because there will be a big difference between a team that is healthy and a team that is not. But even when healthy, the Saints showed some concerning traits outside of the first 2 games of the 2024 season, inconsistencies and challenges in navigating adversity. Kind of everything had to be perfect. All those other things. You don't want to see that in 2025. And so if the roster isn't going to change, the coaching staff becomes the most important piece behind all of it, in addition to health.
But that's what I'm worried about. You're taking the 2023 Los Angeles Chargers coaching staff with Kellen Moore and Brandon Staley and running it back. And you're doing it with a roster that I think at minimum is the same. And if you look at the Chargers, who went, 5-12 with that coaching staff, and then Jim Harbaugh takes over, the roster doesn't improve mightily. Like, they add a draft class, but they didn't sign a ton of free agents. And people were mocking the offensive skill positions of the Los Angeles Chargers going into the season. They have 2 old edge rushers. Joey Bosa always hurt and definitely taken a step back as a player. Derwin James isn't quite what he was at his absolute peak of his powers. And they went to the playoffs. What was the big difference? It was coaching. So you're taking a coaching staff that got less out of a playoff team last year, who had them as a lottery team, and saying that, hey, the roster isn't that different, but we're going to get a huge boost from those 2 coaches. Like, to me, it's nonsense. And right now, like, the Saints will win some games, but the Saints are one of the most boring, uninspiring teams in the entire NFL. Like, there's nothing about the New Orleans Saints that gets you excited about their season. And I am very curious to how my guy, Ross Jackson, the mastermind, is spinning things this offseason to try to get people excited for this football team.
It feels like it's finally the coming to roost, all of the salary cap manipulation the Saints have done for years and years and years. And everyone says, well, the salary cap is fake and you can always create more money and the Saints will just keep pushing that debt into the future and they'll always be fine. And now we're looking around going, well, all you got was Brandon Cooks and Velus Jones and a couple of, Justin Reed and Gadcho. Like he mentioned,
there's some other additions.
It wasn't nothing, but they're pretty locked into the guys they have. In the meantime, they're paying Marshawn Lattimore $30 million in dead cap money. They're paying Michael Thomas $9 million. They're paying Jameis Winston still $7 million in New Orleans. Like that's those bills that they pushed off in the future are coming due today, and it's keeping them from being that better team now. And it feels like one of the more hopeless situations because even the teams that were worse last season, they've got avenues to get a lot better still and add young quarterbacks and change the direction of their franchise. Like, we talked about the Giants and the Titans and maybe the Raiders and the Patriots in there. Like there's room for those teams to have a path forward, but the Saints, they're stuck in this like bad team limbo without a way out. And that feels worse.
And even in their division, the Panthers probably going to get better Bryce Young out of the gate than what they got last year when they benched him early in the year. Probably going to get better play there. So the Panthers, in theory, should be a better football team. And then the Atlanta Falcons with Michael Penix Jr., they went to Penix because they thought he was better than Kirk Cousins. Well, Michael Penix in year 2, in theory, should be better than Michael Penix in year 1, who only got to play the last month of the season. So the Falcons and Panthers could both be more formidable teams this year, making it even harder on the Saints to take that step forward. This isn't like the Cincinnati Bengals, where it's like, yeah, we're running it back, but we had some bad luck last year, and our team's still pretty good. We still have some players. This is, hey, we're running it back, and we had a bad team last year, and we don't have a lot to be excited about this year either. So it's not like that. So it's very perplexing to me that the Saints' big move here and their big addition is a coaching staff that has proven that it doesn't get the most out of players and that there are far better coaches in the league.
I think if you're trying to find the positive spin there, right, it's that, okay, we've seen Kellen Moore be a successful offensive mind in Philadelphia and Dallas. He's had some success at both of those spots. And that maybe in Los Angeles with Brandon Staley as the head coach, that the head coach is not the role for Staley, that with him leading the locker room and like that can hold the offense back. Like if he's just not the right head coach material, that maybe in these different roles, you can still get the good offensive stuff from Kellen Moore that was a little bit overshadowed in Los Angeles because he couldn't spread his wing because he was the OC underneath the head coach that wasn't good at it. And then maybe if you restrict Brandon Staley to just being the defensive coordinator, he can get back to some of the slightly better defenses we've seen him coach in previous staffs before he was head coach with the Chargers. And we're not basing it on the 2023 Chargers, but more basing it on what those guys did at other spots in roles that are more applicable to what they're going to be in now. But I even feel like that's a stretch just saying it out loud. Like there's a lot of gymnastics there.
Right. I get how you're trying to look at it. And I'm sure you could, someone out there somewhere will look at it that way. But I have a hard time saying that, Kellen Moore's offense wasn't good with a bad Chargers team. He goes to the best roster maybe assembled in the last 10 years and looks like a good coach. And now he's good enough to be a head coach. And he's going to bring with him the guy who stifled him and wasn't a good enough coach at the previous spot. And, you're right. The hoops that you have to jump through to turn it into a positive are just too many for me. But with that being said, I just have a hard time finding them exciting in any way. It's not even about being good. It's about being entertaining and exciting. And there's just nothing doing for me.
Well, like if you're a Saints fan, what do you look forward to? Hey, I can't wait for 2 years from now when Kellen Moore is fired and we can get a new head coach. Like, is that what you're holding on to? Is like, man, the next coaching staff, who's going to be the next bright young offensive head coach that we can hire in 2027, 20? Like, it's a tough spot.
Certainly hard to get excited about Kellen Moore, Derek Carr. So understandable there. But with that being said, that is going to do it for our show today. I am your host, the Madman Tyler Rowland, for my co-host, Lauren Cox. Thanks for tuning in, everybody, and stay safe out there.